Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to Financial Issues. Great to be here with you this morning. Seth Udinsky, the Studio A team, Sam Case, the rest of the crew here today. We're delighted to have you with us, spending your Tuesday morning with us on Financial Issues. Hope you'll join the conversation, folks. You got to join our live chat every morning, 9:05 Eastern Time, financialissues.org/live. Great place to be to join the conversation there. Today's show, Alex McFarland, Dr. Alex McFarland, national author, speaker, and evangelist, will join me shortly. New York City is, in his own words, poised for disaster as the looming shadow of Muslim socialist mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani stands over the Big Apple. Dr. McFarland will give his expertise on this very important issue. I'm excited for that. He'll be coming up in about 10 minutes with me, folks. Looking forward to having him on. Also, buy now, pay later loans, BNPLs, I believe is what they're called for short, Sam, as the Utes call them, the young folks.
Yeah, that's the hip way to, that's what they're all talking about. BNPLs. Yeah,
exactly. Well, they're now reaching record levels among Americans, so we'll touch on that later and
what
see
could go wrong.
Why. Exactly right. It's a good question. What could possibly go wrong? Your questions and comments, we'll get to those. First and foremost, folks, right off the bat, President Trump spoke yesterday very favorably about last month's stock deal between the United States government and Intel. This was yesterday. We'll explore what's up with that right now. Sam, what can you tell us about this? Trump was touting this yesterday. Very interesting discussion to open our show.
Yeah, and the reason he's touting it is a lot of conservatives are not too pleased about this deal, saying it reeks of big government, socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. The U.S. government taking a 10% stake, which I believe will be the biggest stake in the company in the chip-making giant Intel. Trump posted on Truth Social that he would, quote, make deals like this for our country all day long, and said only, quote, stupid people would oppose this type of deal, claiming the arrangement would make the U.S. richer and bring more jobs to America. And according to CNBC, the stake is worth, get this, $8.9 billion. The question is, how did we spend that money? Well, what happened here is the Trump administration pretty cleverly leveraged the CHIPS Act, leveraged money that was already supposed to go into Intel for this stock deal. Here's White House economist Kevin Hassett giving those details yesterday.
The bottom line is that because of the CHIPS Act, the U.S. government had decided to give a whole bunch of money to Intel, and President Trump and Howard Lutnick, Secretary Lutnick, talked to Intel about the progress they were making in the hurdles that they had to hop over in order to get the money, and I don't think they're particularly happy with that progress. And so in the end, they worked out a deal where Intel is going to get the CHIPS money, but in exchange, we're going to get some equity, and equity is not voting, so there's not going to be government intrusion into the business of Intel. It's more like a down payment on a sovereign wealth fund, which many, many countries have.
Both Hassett and Trump say more deals like this could be coming in the future. I saw Howard Lutnick today saying that Trump is also considering some deals like this in the defense industry as well. So your thoughts, Seth?
Yeah, I saw that this morning, Sam. You know, Sam, before I give my thoughts on it, can you give us a little bit of the background for this? Because that's somewhat important for this. Intel was not doing so well before this. What can you tell us about
and that is some of the heartburn over this whole thing, is that now it appears that the Trump administration has sunk the U.S. into what is a struggling company. Intel stock price, according to National Review, dropped by over 50% between early 2021 and early 2023. Then after a brief spike, it then declined by more than 50% again since the beginning of 2024. I think I looked at their numbers and they're still in the negative over 5 years. So the idea is now we're tied to this struggling company, and what is the government going to be willing to do to regulate around it to prop it up? So are we going to be propping up a dying company so that it can't fail and just be sinking more and more money into this thing?
And the word that comes to my mind, Sam, with that is that terrible S word, subsidies, government subsidies. We're subsidizing now this company. Interesting one. Boy, all we needed, Sam, was another controversial topic to start our show. We had Social Security yesterday, and now we got this one. Chat, what do you think? Let me ask you, is this a good idea of what Trump's doing here? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Put them in the chat right now. I'll share mine here right off the bat. Sam, let me say this. I really like Donald Trump. I really like him. I think he's the best president of my lifetime. He's a leader with conviction.
Now you say that, and it makes me think you're going to say something you don't like about Donald Trump.
I like Donald Trump a lot. I celebrated his win back in November. I'm grateful to what God has done. What I'm about to say, and you're exactly right, Sam, it has nothing to do with the litany of good things Trump has done so far or my confidence in him. I might be one of those stupid people that he's referring to, though, Sam. I think this is a terrible move from the Trump administration. Terrible, terrible, terrible move. First off, right off the bat, Sam, we talked about this yesterday when we were preparing for the show, but this sets a really bad precedent. Sets a really, really bad precedent for the U.S. government. We're all feeling great about this, or maybe at least we're like, okay, whatever, Trump's doing this. You know, maybe it's to grow American jobs, the sovereign wealth fund, as Hassett just said. But the reason we're feeling great about it, Sam, is because of the one who's in the Oval Office. Trump is in control. God forbid, but this could happen. God forbid, 3 years from now, Gavin Newsom, for example, beats out J.D. Vance for the presidential race. And now we have President Newsom. God forbid it. I say that again, God forbid it. But what if that happens? Now he's in charge. I'm not so sure I like this deal with him in charge. Or what if...
And the precedent is set that he can also buy more companies.
Yeah, it's exactly right. He can buy more companies. He can choose which boosts he wants the U.S. government to give to these dying companies. Folks, this is not the free market. This is the market that is being controlled by the federal government. And Sam, I got to say this might be controversial. If Joe Biden had done this, if Barack Obama had done this, if Bill Clinton had done this, how would we have, as conservatives, have reacted? I would not have been pleased. Bill Clinton, I was only like 6 at the time, but that's neither here nor there. If Biden or Obama had done this, I would have rightly come down on them and said, that's stupid. You can't do that. Chat, what do you think? How would you have reacted had Joe Biden done this? Probably with some warranted outrage. Just because Trump does it does not automatically make it good. And again, I say that as someone who really likes Donald Trump. Secondly, Sam, we talked about this as well. How can we celebrate the cure for a company being the federal government swooping in to save the day, which is really what this is?
Right. You can't imagine a thriving company is going to be willing to take a deal like this, saying, you know, we're doing so well. Exactly. You know what we need right now? The government to have a major stake in our company. That's really going to boost our sales. Yeah, that's not a good sign for the company.
Yeah. That's a sign of sickness. That's a sign of sickness that the government needs to come in and help. You know, Sam, when I heard this yesterday, and I'll ask this to you, we talked about this. This sounded like a government bailout wrapped in different wrapping paper to me. You know, we all come down hard on government bailouts, and we should. How is this similar to a government bailout, and how is it different?
Well, it'd be a government bailout in that you have a failing company and now you have the government injecting money into it to prop it up. And the way that is different is this money was already going to go to Intel because this was part of that Biden CHIPS Act. So what Trump was doing was leveraging that money to get something out of it, which, as I said, you could view that as clever. And maybe he's even right that it could bring jobs to the United States and make the country richer. The problem is now you have the United States government tied to this company and its interests are tied to this company. So is it now a competitor? Is the United States government now a direct competitor to major companies like NVIDIA? Are we now going to be regulating the industry to prop up Intel and hurt NVIDIA? And then maybe even worse than that, let's say you have some guy in Silicon Valley right now. He's just a genius. He's working in his garage. He doesn't really have much money, but he has developed a brand new chip that is going to change the future. Is the government going to now try to crush that guy to keep Intel going? And that just doesn't seem like a good way to pave forward the future, especially in an industry like semiconductors where we need the best, most advanced chips in order to beat China. Because this is actually how China does things, is they have their guys on the inside in these companies. They still let the companies behave like free companies, but they're still keeping a watchful eye over what they're doing. And as we've seen with China, that crushes their productivity because it doesn't allow people to take risky, creative moves when you have the government breathing down your neck.
Well said, man. Yeah, really, really well said. You know, either way, whether it's a bailout or not, whether it's a traditional bailout or a bailout like this, a stock bailout, the fact that the U.S. government's driving company stock up, buying stake, and it's not a good look for the company, not a good sign for Intel. And this is not the free market, folks. Sam, you'd mentioned, you know, the stock was tanking before this. Since the deal, it's risen back up 28%. Listen, I love when companies that I own, when the stock rises, I think that's great, but it doesn't always mean that it's a good thing.
Well, you do own it now. It is. We all own
by
it.
Tax dollars. That's exactly right. And third, this is, I think, a really important thing here, folks. And I want to be careful saying this, but I think it's worth saying. This is not outright socialism, but it is a step towards socialism. Trump is not a fascist, okay? The liberals will tell you that he is. They'll use the term fascist to describe as a euphemism for anything conservative. They'll say Trump is a fascist. What they really mean is Trump is a conservative and I don't like it.
They're calling him a fascist for cleaning up D.C.
Exactly. That's not fascism. What Trump is doing here, though, unfortunately, is a step towards what actual fascism is, where you don't have the government controlling everything like in socialism. But like you mentioned, Sam, China is very similar to this. You have companies who are definitionally free, in quotes, but the government heavily influences them. This is a step towards this. Cronyism could be another words for it. There is a free market, but the free is in quotes.
And what's really ironic about this, the left-wingers who love to call Trump a fascist, and again, I'm not saying he is at all,
that's right.
But people like Bernie Sanders, who love to throw out that F word, are coming out in praise of this deal. So it's very ironic.
That's right. Pretty interesting stuff there. Listen, here's the lesson. We need to keep the free market free. The free market is at its best when it is truly a free market. And I hope that Trump, who is a promoter of small government, at least in word, and I applaud him for that, I hope he's going to back that up with action and not just talk. More on the other side of this break to come right after this.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life, and some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
When God calls us to follow Him, it starts as a personal conviction.
When I realized what I had been investing my money in, God immediately convicted my heart.
But as we experience the joy that comes from following God, we encourage others to join us in our journey.
If anybody's listening, thinking about joining, there's nothing like it.
As more people join us, our impact for Christ compounds.
Align your investments with your faith. Become an FISM partner today at financialissues.org.
I found out I was pregnant when I was 21 years old. For me, I was scared, I was shaking. They do an ultrasound, and that's when everything changed. When I saw my baby and when I heard her heartbeat, that was it. We've seen the hand of God ever since we stepped into the pregnancy center.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Welcome back, folks. Financial Issues. Interesting, delightful conversation as usual. I appreciate seeing so many of you in the chat. We'll get to some of these chat comments in just a moment here. But first, why don't we take a look at what the markets did yesterday? So as they transferred their emotional well-being, I feel like I'm reading a story to my kids. Once upon a time, the markets were so emotionally just crazy and unstable. So,
and little did the markets know.
That's right. Little did they
I don't
know.
I don't know where that's going.
That's exactly right. So yesterday, they transferred their emotional well-being from Jerome Powell, which is what they were clinging to last week, to the perennial chip darling NVIDIA. Sam, you aptly mentioned earlier today that now we have to wonder, is the U.S. government going to become a prime competitor of NVIDIA through Intel, through its puppet Intel? We'll just have to see. But NVIDIA does report on Wednesday, so tomorrow after the bell. So the markets opened the week feeling a little pensive, a little tepid, tentative, whatever word you want to describe there. The NASDAQ kept its head afloat in the morning. The other two indices were slightly down by midday. There wasn't really much change in the indices. The Dow Jones was trending downward the furthest. Late afternoon, the NASDAQ was flirting with the flat line in the final minutes, and by Monday's closing bell, All three indices were down. The Dow Jones was down 0.75%, S&P 500 down just less than 0.5%, and the NASDAQ right around 0.25% down. This morning, the futures are continuing to slip. There was a big headline that came out that I'll mention right here, and I don't think we'll have time to talk about it here, but Trump did tell Fed Governor Lisa Cook that she is fired, and then she came back and said he has no authority to do that. So
kind of amazing. You're fired.
Yeah.
No.
You're fired. No. Boy, to be able to have that kind of power over your job. Yeah, it does bring up, to mind, folks, just the question of who is in charge of the Federal Reserve. Who can fire these guys? We don't know. Maybe we'll talk about that later on, but let's pivot for a moment here, folks, because I've got a very special guest on the program with me right now, Dr. Alex McFarland. He is a nationally renowned pastor, speaker, author. He's host of the Alex McFarland Show and Exploring the Word. Dr. McFarland, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, good morning. I hope you're having a productive day so far.
We are, brother. I'm already a little bit out of breath because of the rant that we had in the first segment there. So I'm going to try to slow down here a little bit with you on here. But, I'd love to get your thoughts, Dr. McFarland, right away on some quotes that you've shared recently concerning the very likely election of Muslim socialist autocrat Zohran Mamdani to the mayoral seat in New York City. This has become a story of national attention, as you know, Dr. McFarland, and one which caught your eye as you said, quote, New York City is now poised for disaster. Could you speak to this for just a moment? Why would such a candidate as Mamdani be truly disastrous for New York City?
Well, not only for New York City, but really for the country at large. And thank you for being willing to talk about this. I've been to New York so many times, and there's a lot that everybody loves about New York City, but this is the 12th or 13th largest economy in the world. Metro New York. Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing.
Bigger GDP than Canada, bigger GDP than France. And there are, at best estimate, 103 billionaires in New York City. And, Mamdani says there should not be billionaires. Now, his PAC just this week got a major donation from a billionaire. And, there's just so much wrong here. You kind of wonder, where do you get on the train? For one thing, let's just remember that on 9/11, it was Mamdani's worldview, Islam, that was responsible for the deaths of 3,000 New Yorkers. Yeah. And I mean, it's just like so demoralizing that a Muslim would be mayor of New York. I mean, it would be like if they put Hirohito on the state seal of Hawaii. I mean, think about that for those of you that know about Pearl Harbor. Anyway, here's the deal, though. Demanding that apartments not have rent, forcing companies to put grocery stores in neighborhoods where they'll be robbed blind and bankrupted. Socialism never works. And really, socialism is the doorway to communism, which is really what their end goal is. I mean, really, the redistribution of wealth, the confiscation of earnings, and the forcible redistribution of wealth while they themselves, the overlords, live posh lives that have been provided them by a capitalist economy. The voters of New York, please, in the name of all that is holy, wake up. I mean, any garden variety Democrat would be better than this guy.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's funny. Sam and I have talked, Dr. McFarland, on the show before about how, listen, I'm no fan of Eric Adams, but he's looking a whole lot better than this guy is right now. And
oh, my Lord.
Yeah. It's truly, it is disastrous. I agree with you completely. It's been almost 24 years now to the day, Dr. McFarland, as you mentioned, since those horrific attacks on the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. So less than a generation, we have gone from that to now having a Muslim socialist probably being the one to run America's most important city. My question for you is, how has someone with such an obviously erroneous, vile worldview become poised to become the mayor of America's largest city when his values run so counter to who we are as a country?
2 words: government schooling. See, I used to use the term public schools, but government schooling has been just cranking out compliant little socialists for years. Now, there are those of us like yourself, and I believe myself, that are, we want to learn and we find out the truth of how the world works, how reality works. We learn the truth of our great nation. I'm very pleased back there behind you, you've got the American flag and the flag of Israel. But, it's funny. Let me digress for just a moment. Last week, I was with a group in an event, and there were about 2,000 people there, mostly Christians, but there were a group of young millennials that began to really take me to task. And these were Christians for my support of Israel. Now, these are Christian college students, Gen Z, millennials, some that were not college students, and they were just viscerally opposed to America supporting Israel. And I said, look, I think any honest person would recognize that if Israel were not where they are, the entire Middle East would be overrun by Hamas and terrorists. And my point is, it was hard to get them to think critically about why we have a vested interest in supporting Israel. And regarding New York City, the reason I'm bringing this up is we've got generations of young people that have been taught that corporations that make a profit, profits are obscene, profit is immoral, capitalism, bad, socialism, compassionate. But it's like Margaret Thatcher. She was Prime Minister of Great Britain in the 80s during the Reagan years, and she said, socialism is great until you run out of other people's money.
Amen.
And there are a lot of young people, and they don't know how wealth is created. They don't know how to live within your means, save, exercise self-restraint, and build wealth. And Mamdani is using the tools of a constitutional capitalist republic to undermine and tear down a constitutionalist capitalist republic. One final thing that I would say would be disastrous. Even right this morning, Mamdani is encouraging cities. He's calling on all the Democrat-run cities like Boston and Detroit to, quote, fight Trump's agenda. Well, Donald Trump is just doing the best for American people. In fact, it was pointed out this week that his tariffs have already shaved $4 trillion off the national debt. So for the mayor of the largest economy in America to say, quote, fight our president, that's treason. The last thing I would say is that there's this coattail effect. And right now, Mamdani's political team is helping like this male Democrat in Texas and other members of the squad. And I think it would be very disastrous if he becomes mayor of New York, it's going to be a fiasco. New York City will become the dystopian hellscape that places like Seattle and Minneapolis are, and Dearborn and Detroit. But there could be this coattail effect where naive, uninformed voters sweep other Marxists into office in cities across America, and that would not be good. Folks, pray for some sanity to descend on the Big Apple.
So well said, Dr. McFarland. Let me ask you this question here as we're coming to the end of our interview. How might God be speaking to the people of this country through this? We understand God often warns and even outright judges his people through the institution of wicked rulers. Is this a warning shot across the belt? Is this a direct judgment? How might God be speaking to us?
Well, perfect question. That is a great question. Our nation needs a revival. Here's the thing. Socialism, aka Marxism, communism, is godless. It is immoral, and it confiscates what one worker earned and gives. And to those who may or may not work, in 2 Thessalonians says, if a man will not work, neither shall he eat. 2 Thessalonians 3:10. So it rewards things that the Bible condemns. But I would just implore people to pray for our nation. And I want to call on my fellow pastors. Brother, I've spoken in 2,000 American churches and pastored 2 churches. Ministers need to get in their pulpits and tell the truth. And pastors for decades would say to me, "Oh, the IRS forbids me from addressing political issues."
Yeah.
That's false. But even if they did, since when do we ministers ameliorate what we do or don't say based on, what the culture is doing? Get in your pulpits. Pro-abortion, anti-God, anti-religious freedom, Marxist candidates, to waste a vote on those guys is a sin. Be a good steward of your vote, people, especially those of you in New York.
Dr. McFarland, thank you so much. The thought came to my mind as you were speaking there. Thank goodness the first generation of Christians in the first century Rome didn't do what you described so many pastors do, and they shy away from speaking on political issues. Had that first generation done that, the church might not have survived. So praise God that we've had strong men, and you're exactly right, brother. We need strong pastors who are willing to speak to these issues. Dr. McFarland, I appreciate you coming on our show so much. Folks, again, that's Dr. Alex McFarland, nationally renowned pastor, speaker, author, host of the Alex McFarland Show and Exploring the Word as well. You can find him on social media platforms as well, Dr. Alex McFarland. I look forward to having you on again, brother, at a future time. Thank you so much for joining me today. Folks, if you have to leave us, we hope you have a great rest of the day. We got more financial issues right around the corner. After this, stick with us. Here at Financial Issues, we've been hard at work making your partnership experience even better than ever. With the major website upgrade, you will experience the following: a smarter portfolio tracker, making it easier to manage and follow the Financial Issues strategy, a new partner dashboard, your investments at a glance, a streamlined partner hub, also an updated buy list every week, consistently reviewed and maintained by the Financial Issues analyst team. We've been getting feedback from a lot of excited partners.
I really love the new website. It's great. So thankful and blessed with the new website. It's amazing. Thank you so much for all the hard work.
Now, even though we've improved, one thing hasn't changed. That's our commitment to biblically responsible investing and faithful stewardship. We remain dedicated to equipping you with the best tools to honor God with your finances. If you've been thinking about becoming a partner, now is the perfect time to take the next step. Sign up today at financialissues.org.
I found out I was pregnant when I was 21 years old. For me, I was scared, I was shaking. I Googled places to abort. We drive there, and as soon as we get there, I open the door, and the first thing that I see is a bunch of Bible verses in the walls. They gave me a little counseling session, they gave me the pregnancy test again, and they do an ultrasound. And that's when everything changed. When I saw my baby and when I heard her heartbeat, that was it. We decided with my boyfriend at the time, which is now my husband, to continue the pregnancy together. We started coming to the classes, doing our homework, getting counseling together. We've seen the hand of God ever since we stepped into the pregnancy center.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Thank you, folks, for joining us today. It was great to have Dr. McFarland on. I always enjoy getting to speak with him, and always so grateful for courageous men like him who've devoted their lives to spreading the gospel and also to speaking to these political issues, folks. I can't stress what Dr. McFarland said enough. If you are a pastor or if you're attending a church that has said, we try to just stay out of politics, we don't want to try to get into that, it might be time to either have a hard conversation with your pastor or find another church, because you need to be led by courageous shepherds who are willing to speak to these issues like the great men of old, all the way back to the first century, were able to do. Our Lord Jesus himself spoke to these issues, folks. And of course, we agree, amen and amen, to the fact that our kingdom is not of this world. But nonetheless, we're here right now needing to be good stewards of what God has given to us. So we got to do that, folks. Simple as that. Let's get to a little chat rundown here. Great to see so many of you. Brian from Missouri, we'll start with you. New York City will become such a bleep hole that the citizens will have to wake up to reality and start voting smarter. I agree with you there, Brian. Amen.
Unless all the smart citizens leave and then no one else is left.
That's exactly right.
We'll have to see.
And
that's the fear.
That is a good question for you, chat. Is it the responsibility of people who want to be good stewards of their city? Is it your responsibility to stay and fight, or is it your responsibility to take your family and go to a place that is a place of safety? Personally, I don't mean to be the middleman here, but I think you can do either one within your conscience, definitely. I've heard very many faithful stories of people who have said, you know what, I'm getting out of here, and I think that's totally fine. I've heard other ones, people saying, you know what, I'm going to stay and fight, I'm going to try, and then maybe they stay and fight for 5 years, and then they say they're getting out of here. So I think either way, interesting there for sure. Claude is saying the acceptance of Mamdani indicates the world is close to accepting the Antichrist. Claude, it's interesting there because we have seen the spirit of Antichrist present throughout the ages. And I do think Mamdani, you're exactly right. It's just another example of this. Oftentimes what you'd see throughout history, and we're talking about this a little bit in the Daniel Bible study, is statist governments. Statist governments, where governments come in and they say, the all-powerful government will take care of you. It's really an attempt to be God. Mamdani's governmental style is that's classic statist government. And I say amen to what you're saying there, brother. I think you're exactly right.
Because nothing's new under the sun.
Yeah,
you saw this when Cyrus let the Jews go back to Israel. You had people writing letters to him saying those bad and rebellious Hebrews are rebuilding their city. Subtext is they're breaking apart. They want to be separate from us, the all-powerful Persian Empire.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen it over and over again. We saw it in Persia, saw it in Babylon, saw it in Rome. You've seen it at various points in the 20th century, statist governments trying to be God, and Christians need to stand firm against this. And also, I think, Sam, understand that behind these statist governments are demonic forces. We joke about it a lot that our ruling overlords are canoodling with demons. I actually believe that they are. Whether or not they're holding seances or things like that, but they are finding their worldviews, their doctrines from demons, because ultimately it comes back to the prince of demons, comes back to Satan himself. So the anti-God agenda comes from that. We have to be aware of that. Absolutely. John, you said New York will be like London, England. That's very, very bad. I was going to ask Alex that question actually, because I do think England has really become almost kind of like a warning archetype to the United States that, hey, if you don't deal with this, if you don't deal with the influx of a godless, demonic worldview like Islam, man, it could go really bad.
And we tend to mirror each other, England and the United States. If one does one thing, pretty soon the other is going to do the exact same thing. You saw with Trump, and then they did Brexit. So now they're moving in more liberal progression. So we have to pray that doesn't come back to the United States.
Yeah, that's really well said there. Nathan, is there anyone that can fire back at a verbal attacker with a voice as calm and polite as brother Alex? Boy, he's a good example of that, isn't he, brother? Of firing back with tact and with truth and with facts. I think that's really, really good. I love that. Let's see here. Talking about what we were talking about in the first segment with government bailouts, some of you have mentioned very interestingly the bailouts that took place back right around the financial crisis. You had Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Kind of interesting, I think, connection there that we're seeing here. So yeah, interesting stuff there.
Too big to fail?
For sure. That's exactly right. Too big to fail. That's exactly right. Mark with a great comment there. Intel is dirty. Supports abortion, sexual immorality. Sure does, brother. So we want no part of it. Unfortunately, our tax dollars are being invested in it. But we unfortunately can't control that. So we want to control what we can control with our investor dollars. Brian from Missouri saying, not a fan of the government taking stake in publicly owned companies. I also don't think the government should be giving billions of tax dollars dollars to companies either.
Amen, amen.
Of communism, Brian, amen, brother. Boy, it's certainly, you're exactly right. We want the free market to be free, folks. The free market is a good thing. I've been listening to a really, really impactful series for me on the book of Revelation. It's kind of helped me as I'm studying the book of Daniel. And the pastor in it speaks about how the free market is the biblical model of economics. The free market is the way to go. And anything that is not the free market is not biblical. And so when you have, like what we're having here and what we had in ancient Rome as well, when you have the state starting to poison the free market, it becomes not free, and it therefore becomes anti-biblical. The
sad thing about it, too, is it makes people dislike the free market because they think that this is capitalism.
Yeah,
they think corporatism, cronyism, bailouts, graft, things like that, sweet little handouts from the government. They think that that is what capitalism entails. It just doesn't. Capitalism lets the strong rise and the weak fall, and then the market sorts those things out.
Exactly right. Yeah, it really is. I mean, I feel like, Sam, a good word to describe it is it's just common sense economics. And if you think about God being a God of order and wisdom and common sense, just makes sense. Really does. Some of you talking as well about Cracker Barrel. We did see, I think it was yesterday, Sam, Cracker Barrel issued a pseudo apology for their shall we say, questionable aesthetic decisions.
Didn't they say, we could have done better?
They did.
But we're not changing anything, but we could have done better.
What I read there is they said, we could have done better with, I don't know if it was how we announced this, or they basically had to backtrack and say that the guy, and Sam, forgive me, his name is escaping me, but the classic guy.
Just call him Mr. Cracker Barrel.
Mr. Cracker Barrel. He's still going to be on the menu. He's still going to be on road signs, but he's not going to be on their logo anymore. It was your classic, we're apologizing without really apologizing. They really screwed this one up, folks. They really did. And this has been going on, by the way, for some time. Cracker Barrel was once on our list. We issued a sell alert for it. It's no longer on our list. I'm thankful for that, Sam, because it's really going downward for sure. Interesting stuff there, folks. Let's get to the markets here as we just opened up the day. Before we get to the ag report, everything is hanging right around the flat line. So the Dow Jones is just below, the S&P 500 is directly at the flat line, and the NASDAQ is just above the flat line. Oil, meanwhile, is right around a little less than $64 a barrel. It was down from its 3-week highs. Gold is right around, it's about $3,400, a little more than that right now. Meanwhile, the U.S. 10-year Treasury yield hanging right around 4.3% or so. Sam, quickly, before the ag here, one of the big headlines this morning is, can Donald Trump actually fire Fed Board Governor Lisa Cook? We don't know. But Trump
I was going to say, I hope you're not asking me, because I really don't know.
He's claiming that he can fire. He actually said that she is fired. She said he has no authority to do so. She said, and I quote, "I will not resign." She plans to finish out her term. Fed Governor Cook was a Biden appointee. And so once again, folks, this just brings to a head what we've said for so many times. Who is in charge of the Federal Reserve? Is there any accountability here?
Trump can fire with cause.
Yes,
that's what the rules are. But the question is, what is the cause?
Right. My understanding, Sam, we talked about this before the show, is that there was some legal things going on with Fed Governor Cook that was
questionable. It's a question about mortgage fraud.
Yeah, question about mortgage fraud, but she was never charged for it. So if she's not charged for it, I guess what she's saying is...
there's an ongoing DOJ investigation right now.
Yeah, for sure. So listen, folks, I do think that the point stands nonetheless. We have to be able to have institutions that have real accountability. And if the Federal Reserve doesn't have real accountability, I'm not sure how it can be treated as a legitimate institution. The Ag Report's coming in, folks. Craig Haugard, then we'll talk more on the other side of this break after this.
This is Craig Haugard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for August 26. Well, corn benefited from better than expected weekly export inspections yesterday. Also should be noted that the latest crop progress report has corn's good to excellent rating at 71%. Now, that's the highest rating for this date since 2016. In fact, last year at this time, the corn crop was rated at 65% good to excellent. That gave us a record production. We had December corn finishing the day 0.75 cents higher yesterday at 4.12 1/4. The soybean complex started the week with a weaker tone after the Pro Farmer Crop Tour found record large pod counts in several states. Now, they estimate the national soybean yield at 53 bushels per acre. That'd be a record by a full bushel per acre. Late last week, we had some rumors that China was inquiring about U.S. soybeans. Those rumors died over the weekend. Comments from the Chinese embassy suggest that the U.S. protectionism is damaging agricultural ties between the two nations. As a result, November beans were 10 3/4 cents lower at 10.47 3/4. Wheat was supported by strong weekly export inspection numbers, this week's figure being more than double last week's total. As a result, Minneapolis December wheat was 2.5 cents higher at 5.92 1/2. Kansas City declined by 1/4 cent, closing at 5.20 3/4, while Chicago was 2.5 cents higher at 5.29 3/4. Cotton futures had a negative reaction to a stronger dollar. As a result, December futures were 69 points lower at 67.32. Livestock futures turned in a mixed performance. October live cattle were $1.05 lower at $236.82 1/2 per hundredweight. Feeder cattle declined by 77.5 cents, with September futures closing at $361.90 per hundred. Live cattle and feeder cattle were lower yesterday after it was reported over the weekend that the first human screwworm case in the United States had been found in Maryland. We also had October lean hog futures 20 cents higher yesterday at $91.40 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures started the week with a bounce higher. The closing bell, we had September futures up 16 points at 18.43. This has been Craig Haugard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
The American people are taking a stand against woke policies.
People have had enough. They are watching what's going on and saying, I don't support this. They're making the only argument that's convincing to corporations when they start talking with their wallets. And the corporations are starting to wake up.
Tractor Supply is back.
John Deere announced is phasing out.
Harley Davidson is making a
Lowe's
U-turn.
joins the ever-growing list of companies ditching DEI.
Money talks. So why not have it represent your values? Learn more at financialissues.org.
Where's Mima? We found out Shepard's diagnosis when I was about 17 weeks pregnant. We learned that he was going to need a series of surgeries after he was born in order to give him what they considered a normal life. And we weren't sure how this worked.
Yeah, very emotional, very, very broken. And as my wife just said, not sure how this worked. And called Samaritan, and they said, you just go have that baby. You leave the rest to us.
And just to hear the confidence on the other end of the phone of this is not something that you need to be concerned about at all. You focus on the health of your family, the health of your baby, and we will walk with you every step of the way.
My baby was like this big, and I saw his heart beating on the screen. I went from, I don't want this baby, to talking to my child on the screen. That sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to Mom.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Thanks for joining us today, folks. I always do enjoy getting to engage with you all in the chat there. So if you're on the chat and you haven't chimed in, go ahead and say hello. We'd love to give you a shout out.
He's lying. He actually hates it.
That's right. No. Yeah, it is the worst. Oh, it's just, I dread it. No, seriously, I do love getting to speak with each of you. So once again, if you're on the chat, you haven't chimed in and said hello, go ahead and do that right now. I'll try to get you a shout out before the end of the show. Sam, let's talk about this buy now, pay later stuff that's going on. Apparently there's a record number of this. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it comes as credit card debt is also hitting a new high, and people are finding some pretty creative ways to get into additional debt. According to a Lending Tree survey, they found about a half of all Americans expect to apply for a buy now, pay later loan in the next 6 months. Now, of course, Gen Z, they're the most likely age group to use these loans, with 64% saying they've already used one of these apps in the past. It's a program you sign up for. Among those Gen Z users, more than 70% have reported using more than one at the same exact time. Not too good. Most of these loans, what are they being used for? That's the important important question.
Yeah.
Number one, it was clothing, shoes, and accessories, followed by technology devices, so like cell phones, probably mostly cell phones, and maybe computers. Followed after that was home decor. And then finally, this one I found kind of disturbing because it shows you're really in a dire strait if you need buy now, pay later for groceries. 25% of people who have used these loans said that they've used them for groceries. That's up from 14% a year ago, which is really, really not a good sign of things. These are kind of like credit cards, but they're way easier to apply for, meaning that if you're already in a bad economic situation, it's easy, really easy, in fact, to get into a worse one, and that debt can really pile up.
Thanks for bringing that up, Sam. Good time as any, folks, to remind you of our stance on debt. Debt's not sinful. And I understand, the Bible says the borrower is slave to the lender. That's a principle of wisdom more than it is a principle of morality versus immorality. Debt is not sinful. It can be very dangerous. And many times it's very foolish. Certain things can be foolish, but some things are not. If there's something that is not foolish or easily or overly burdensome, debt can be something that could be used for good. For example, a mortgage. If you go into a mortgage, you can afford it. That could be an example of good debt. I would say another kind of acceptable debt would be an emergency expense you absolutely cannot pay for at that moment. If you or a loved one has a medical procedure that your insurance doesn't cover or your health sharing isn't able to cover, and the only way to get the procedure done is to go into debt, I say go into debt. It's worth it if it's life-saving, absolutely. So I think that would be really important to remember. But Sam, you mentioned the things on that list, the types of things that are on the list for BNPL loans: clothes, tech, groceries, home decor. None of those items are justified for buy now, pay later. None of them are. And they're indicative of a country that is in a serious debt problem. There's a biblical principle here, folks. We can never forget it. Only buy what you can afford.
The question is, what if you can't afford anything and you need groceries? That's the thing I was concerned about. I was going to Aldi the other day, which is the discount grocery store. Yeah. That's where you need to go if you can't really afford groceries. That's kind of why I like it. I can afford groceries, but it's really cheap, which is it's fantastic.
Right.
But even they are using buy now, pay later. Right when you check out, they said, do you want to split up this purchase? And I'm thinking, if Aldi, of all the grocery stores out there, is offering this service, what does that mean for what people are able to afford right now?
It's true, Sam. And you know what? That is a really tough one there. And I do think the answer to that is if you're in such a dire situation that you can't even afford groceries without going into debt, that to me is indicative of a serious structural problem that probably would be requiring some form of outside help. So that would be an example where I would say it's time to go to your pastor, to go to your church. A lot of churches, my church has this. It's the kind of like, it's different from our general fund. The general fund, if you tithe, it goes to that. This is like a special needs fund, or it's a emergency needs fund that our church has, where if church members have a need, they present the need to the elders, and so that it's not abused, there's a screening process for this, but the elders, they check out the need, they see how dire it is, they determine what they can give, and then they help this person out. I think that's what the church is for. I think that's what family is for too. I think there are better ways than just resigning to, okay, I'm going to go into debt to afford these things that I shouldn't be going into debt for, And that's totally, listen, I get things are more expensive, but I do think there are other options out there than just going into debt for things that, you should be able to buy. Sam, it's an interesting point that you brought up there, though, because I'm sure there are a lot more people today than there used to be who can't afford basic things. I can tell you what the solution, and this is borrowing from our conversation on Social Security yesterday. I can tell you what the solution is not. It's not the government getting involved. I can tell you that for sure. It has to be individual intuition, individual resolve, and the help of outside forces that are not the government, charities, churches, families. That's what those things are for. Does that make sense, Sam?
Oh, 100%.
I hope so.
Plus, those institutions, they not only can give you the money, the food, what you need, but they're also invested in you because they did give you those things. There's a personal relationship with those people, and they now want to see you succeed, as opposed to the government, where they really care. They give you your food stamps, and you're off to the races. There's no incentive to really get you out of the hole you're in.
Absolutely. And I think, the government probably would be just as well. They maybe even would root for people to not get out of the hole they're in, because it means that they still need help from the government. So the government can be useful in its sense. Folks, it's a good lesson to be involved with a good, solid church also. obviously for your spiritual health, but also the church can be there to provide physical needs. I mean, really, it's kind of a crass way to think about it, but I do think that it's really important for us to understand that's what the church is there for, is to come alongside where other believers can come alongside and help people. That's why we have, ministries like Samaritan Ministries as our health sharing ministry. It really is a church model of healthcare sharing. I would not have been able to afford my son's surgery that he had, rather major surgery back in December, if we didn't have people like Samaritan coming alongside of us. They covered every single dollar of it outside of the initial unshareable amount. It was amazing. So stuff like that is so important here. Well, let's move here, folks, to one headline we weren't able to get to yesterday, Sam. We saw Canada over the weekend drop a lot of its retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. What can you tell us about this one, Sam?
That's right. This announcement came out on Friday, dropping most of its counter tariffs of 25% on U.S. goods, although there will still be tariffs on certain sectors like auto, steel, aluminum, and others. They will remain in place for right now. The move comes as the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement is scheduled for a review in the next few months, and also as President Trump spoke with the leader of Canada last week. So that was the result of that conversation.
Very good, Sam. Thank you. So things marching on, things moving on here when we're talking about the tariff deals getting worked out. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of those in the coming days, and we'll be sure to let you know what is going on here with these. Sam, let's get to this question here that we got from a dear friend of ours, Pastor Dan Hall and his wife Marcia. They're partners. I appreciate them so much. What is Pastor Dan asking here, Sam?
Pastor Dan says, when filling out the portfolio tracker, what do I select when the options aren't there for the company stock I have? For example, there's nothing for manufacturing, transportation, aircraft, etc. I've been an FI member for several years, and I'm just now filling out the tracker. I've watched the intro video, and I know I have stocks that I'll probably sell eventually, but wanted to get started with what I have.
Well, thank you for that question, Pastor Dan. Let me just say this. I had the privilege of preaching at Pastor Dan and Marcia's church last year, so I appreciate you both very much in the local area here. To answer your question, I assume, and Sam and I were kind of trying to figure out what you were talking about with this. So if we answer and it's not exactly what you were talking about, just send a follow-up to us. We assume, Sam, that he's talking about which industry to pick. So when you're on the tracker and you have your holdings, there's an option for you to pick the industry, and there are many different industries that you can pick. Sam, if you can correct me if I'm wrong as I explain this, but the industry that you pick is not necessarily as important as the sector that you pick, but it is helpful for you to kind of see how your personal allocation works out. So for example, if you're heavy in tech companies that are semiconductor producers, you can know maybe I shouldn't buy any more semiconductor companies, even if I can still fill out my tech sector.
That's exactly right. Sam? Yes. Yeah. The industry has no bearing on your pie chart, which is really that quick visual that's going to tell you what your portfolio looks like. The sectors, just like you said, Seth, that's more for helping you know what the company does in a shorthand way, also help you stay diversified inside your sector.
Yeah. So Pastor Dan, for you guys, if you're asking about, like airplanes, you had mentioned them, for example, there's one option under industry, which is aerospace and defense. I might consider putting that one there. Again, that's really more just for you to be able to kind of see. Now, if what I assumed when I read this question first, if it's a company that's not on our list at all, then I would tell you very easy, if you got stocks that aren't on our list, first check to see if they're BRI or not, and you can use the evaluator tool on our website. If you go to financialissues.org, go to the Resources tab, you go down, I think, let me just confirm this here. Resources tab, it's the fourth one down is the evaluator tool. Click on that and you can use that free screening tool there. If they are biblically responsible, great. If they're not biblically responsible, it's not so great, but it's an easy answer because you just sell them. You sell it immediately. It's better to be obedient to God, and even if it means taking a loss, better to be obedient to God than to knowingly invest in darkness and ride out for the chance of a gain. If they do pass BRI screening, then it's a little more complicated. You have a couple options before you. You can still sell it and reallocate based off of our picks. Might not be a bad idea if you trust us, and also if you're selling at a gain, that's not a bad thing too. You can also hold these positions though, if they're biblically responsible, and see what happens. Just know that we don't have eyes on them. So it might not be a bad move for you, but you just got to be aware it's kind of like you're holding them at your own risk because we're not looking at them. They're not on our lists. So if something happens to them, whether they become non-biblically responsible or if something happens technically or fundamentally that causes concern for us, we won't know about it because we're not looking at them. So just be aware of that. It's part of the overall, benefit of the do-it-yourself part of the strategy. So appreciate that question, Pastor Dan and Marcia, and appreciate you guys so much. Thank you all for joining us today. It was a delight to be here on the show, and I do hope that you'll consider joining us again tomorrow for Financial Issues. Remember, everything you have belongs to the Lord. That's a comforting thought, folks. Let's be found good and faithful stewards of all of it. God bless. We'll see you next time.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.